the gentle clatter of ceramic on saucers, the hushed murmur of contented diners, and the distant, rhythmic sigh of the Atlantic. These were the familiar comforts of the Salty Dog, a small, unassuming cafe nestled in the heart of Oak Haven. On the strong insistence of his sister, Clara, who'd declared he was wasting away in his own personal fog, he'd agreed to. An evening out, he'd ordered a simple ginger ale, a conscious decision to keep his mind sharp for Leo's inevitable pre-dawn wake-up call. Impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit that spoke of city boardrooms and demanding clients, she radiated an air of professional polish. Yet, John noticed the subtle, telltale signs of exhaustion etched around her eyes, the slight slump in her shoulders that even the tailored fabric couldn't quite disguise. She seemed to scan the room, a flicker of something akin to desperation in her gaze, before her eyes landed on the empty seat beside him. He wasn't looking for anything. Not really. Just a brief respite. A moment to feel like someone other than Dad, John ventured, his voice a little rougher than he intended. He'd always found small talk a minefield. He'd settled into a corner booth, the dim, warm light of the Edison bulbs casting long shadows that danced with the sea mist seeping through the window. She listened, really listened, her guarded expression softened, her gaze becoming more focused, more present. Their conversation last night had been a fleeting, chance encounter, a brief oasis in his otherwise predictable routine. And there she was, Eleanor Vance, looking just as polished as before, though perhaps with a slightly less haunted expression. She scanned the room, her eyes finding him. A small, genuine smile touched her lips, a smile that reached her eyes this time. Yet, as he nursed another ginger ale, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He offered a hesitant wave. She walked over, her movements graceful and assured. He'd told Clara she was welcome to join him, but she'd been swamped with paperwork, a phrase John understood all too well. Eleanor, shedding the professional armor, spoke of her grandmother, a woman who'd cultivated a garden that was the envy of her entire village, overflowing with roses and lavender that filled the air with their sweet perfume. He described the hours Leo spent with tiny brushes and glue, his tongue poking out in concentration, as he painstakingly assembled intricate rigging and painted miniature cannons. They weren't trying to impress each other, nor were they seeking to escape their lives entirely. It was simply a space carved out from the relentless demands of their days, a quiet refuge where they could be themselves, unburdened by pretense. Night after night, this became their ritual. They'd find themselves at the Salty Dog, the shared silence punctuated by genuine conversation, each finding solace in the unassuming presence of the other. It was a quiet understanding, a recognition of shared humanity beneath the layers of responsibility and expectation. John, who had felt so utterly alone, began to feel a gentle current of connection pulling him towards something, though he couldn't yet name it. He spoke of the pride in Leo's voice, when he proudly presented his latest creation, a replica of the Black Pearl, its tiny Jolly Roger flag proudly displayed. She recounted childhood summers spent by the sea, the salty spray on her skin, the endless expanse of sand between her toes. She spoke of the simple joy of discovering hidden coves and collecting smooth, sea-worn stones, a stark contrast to the sterile, polished environments she now navigated. There was a quiet empathy in her stillness, a resonance that John hadn't felt since before Sarah's illness. My sister's in town, and she's dragging me to a competitive knitting exhibition. I needed a brief reprieve before the yawn assault. Or maybe you're on a strict ginger ale regimen too. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fill the silence with her own professional triumphs or woes. She simply absorbed his words, her own exhaustion seeming to recede with each shared anecdote about Leo. It was a small, unexpected gift, a moment of genuine human connection in the quiet hum of the cafe, and for the first time in a long time, John felt a faint stirring of something other than the weight of responsibility. He felt seen. Just one, Clara had pleaded, before Leo's pirate-themed birthday party next week. A silent ballet of introductions followed, a shared glance acknowledging the mutual understanding of a rough day. You need to remember what adult conversation sounds like, John. Feels like I've been wrestling sharks all day. Besides, I've got a friend who's been through the ringer, and you two might just... My son, Leo. He's obsessed with sharks and pirates. Everything pirate, really. He's got this entire imaginary crew he talks to. He found himself leaning forward, the usual barrier of his grief in his protective shell beginning to crack. He spoke of Leo's latest obsession, a makeshift pirate ship fashioned from cardboard boxes and bedsheets, a treasure map that led to the cookie jar, and the dramatic reenactments of sword fights with a wooden spoon. He described the pure, unadulterated joy in Leo's eyes when he'd unearthed a particularly shiny seashell, declaring it dragon's gold. It was the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the seafood chowder legendary, and the pace of life dictated by the ebb and flow of the tide. Tonight, however, the usual gentle hum felt like a faint melody to a man adrift. Jonathan Hayes, or John as his friends called him, was a man carved by the sea. His weathered hands, still bearing the faint calluses of years spent as a fisherman, before his wife Sarah's passing, now often cradled a toolbox or a book on maritime history. His world, once a vast expanse of ocean, had shrunk to the cozy confines of their seaside cottage. His soul focused the bright, curious 7-year-old named Leo. Leo, a whirlwind of energy and imagination, lived and breathed a tales John spun of ancient mariners and buried treasure. His days filled with crayon drawings of swashbuckling pirates and quests for booty in the sandbox. But tonight, John was an anomaly. He'd arrived early, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his usual quiet demeanor. Then, she arrived. Like a ship sailing into a quiet harbor, she brought with her an aura of controlled urgency. Her name was Eleanor Vance. Mind if I? Her voice was a low, melodic alto, a surprising counterpoint to her sharp appearance. John, startled, managed a nod. Not at all. Please. She slid into the booth, the faint scent of expensive perfume mingling with the salty air. Eleanor managed a weak, almost weary smile. You could say that just wrapped up a rather spirited negotiation. John chuckled, a genuine, rumbling sound. Eleanor, to John's surprise, didn't offer the polite, distracted nods he'd come to expect from strangers. The following evening, John found himself back at the Salty Dog, a quiet anticipation, a new, unfamiliar companion. He hadn't expected to see Eleanor again. He was just finishing his drink, the last rays of the setting sun painting the cafe in hues of orange and gold. When the bell above the door chimed, John felt a flush of unexpected warmth creep up his neck. Fancy seeing you here again, she said, her voice still that captivating out. Small town, I guess, John replied, the casualness of his words belying the flutter in his chest. Eleanor chuckled, a sound that seemed to chase away some of the residual fatigue. Something like that. Their conversation flowed with an ease that surprised John. They bypassed the usual pleasantries, delving into the more personal territories they'd only skirted the night before. John, in turn, shared Leo's current passion, the meticulous construction of model ships. There was no pressure, no expectation of anything more than the shared moment. The weeks began to blur, marked by these quiet evenings at the Salty Dog. John started bringing his phone out more often, not to check work emails, but to scroll through photos of Leo, a silent testament to the joy that still resided in his life. This is from Leo, he said, his voice a little thick with emotion. He slid it across the table. Eleanor, too, seemed to shed a layer of her professional formality with each passing day. Then, her eyes widened as she read the inscription. A slow, incredulous smile spread across her face, transforming her features. He said, "You sound like you know what you're doing," and overlooking the man who still loved the smell of salt and the promise of the open sea. He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers for a brief, comforting moment. Like you're in charge. John had continued his solitary walks along the beach, Leo a constant, joyful shadow beside him. She was watching Leo, who was entirely absorbed in his latest sandcastle creation, a sprawling fortress complete with intricate turrets. "It's the captain," Leo shouted, abandoning his castle and running towards Eleanor, his small feet kicking up sprays of sand, and a moat that the incoming tide was already threatening to breach. As John approached, Leo looked up, his eyes widening with recognition. Then, one sun-drenched Saturday afternoon, as the tide retreated, leaving behind a glistening expanse of sand, John saw her. "You're here. You're listening. That's more than enough. That's everything." It was forged in the quiet authenticity of shared vulnerability, in the simple act of being truly present for another person. As they left the cafe, the rain had subsided to a soft drizzle. John walked Eleanor to the bus stop, the usual awkward farewell now tinged with a gentle reluctance. She lingered, her gaze fixed on the dimly lit street, clearly hesitant to return to the silent anonymity of her hotel room. The salt-laced air, usually a familiar scent of his home, now seemed to hold the promise of a shared horizon. For the first time in a long time, John felt a warmth that wasn't just from the cafe's cozy interior, but from a shared flicker of hope. She looked at the drawing, then at John, a profound tenderness in her gaze. The sharp edges of her exhaustion seemed to soften, replaced by a more contemplative, reflective demeanor. One particularly blustery evening, as the rain lashed against the cafe window, painting the glass with streaks of silver, John hesitated. He'd tucked something into his jacket pocket that morning, a bright splash of color amidst the usual monochromatic tones of his day. It was a drawing Liam had made, a riot of blue and green for the sea, a bold red for the pirate ship, and a proud, slightly crooked skull and crossbones flying from its mast. Scribbled in thick crayon letters at the bottom, a note read, "To the lady who sounds like a captain, Leo." He pulled it out, his fingers tracing the childish lines. Eleanor picked it up, her brow furrowed for a moment in polite curiosity. "He calls me a captain," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. John nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Eleanor's usual composure seemed to falter. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached up to touch her temple. "You know," she began, her voice catching, This high-powered world I inhabit, it's all about being in charge, about winning, about being, but sometimes," she confessed, a rare vulnerability surfacing, "sometimes I feel like I'm just a title, like the person underneath. The actual me gets lost in the noise. I feel invisible." Tears welled in her eyes, quickly brushed away with a practiced, yet now unpracticed motion. John's heart ached. He understood that feeling of being defined by something outside yourself, of the world seeing the widower, the sole caregiver. "You're not invisible, Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet but firm, laced with a sincerity that resonated in the stillness. Their connection wasn't built on grand declarations or promises of a future. Weeks had passed since that rainy evening. The seasons had begun to turn, the crisp air of autumn now carrying the scent of drying leaves and the lingering aroma of wood. Eleanor was standing near the water's edge, a bright scarf fluttering around her neck. "Mummy, look." Eleanor knelt, meeting Leo at his eye level, her designer jeans now dusted with sand. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that illuminated her entire face. "Are you a pirate captain?" he asked, his voice filled with earnest curiosity. She took Leo's small hand, her thumb gently stroking the back of it. "You know," she said, her voice a gentle whisper of the sea. "I think I'd rather be your friend, Leo. A friend who likes building sandcastles with you. And when was the last time you allowed yourself to be truly seen? To be the person who offers a stranger a reason to feel seen, to rediscover warmth in a world that often feels cold and indifferent, to offer a listening ear, a genuine smile, a shared moment of understanding. These are the threads that weave the tapestry of our human experience, making it richer, warmer, and infinitely more meaningful." "Hello, Leo," she said, her voice soft and warm. "You've built an amazing castle." He saw the effortless grace with which Eleanor knelt to his son's level, the genuine warmth in her response. "I encourage you, as you go about your day, to look for those opportunities. Be present. Offer a little bit of your light, your kindness, your understanding. You never know whose life you might touch, or whose harbor you might become." He saw the simple beauty of a shared moment, unburdened by expectations or societal pressures. If it stirred something within your own heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. We believe in the power of stories to connect us, to inspire us, and to remind us of the beautiful, shared humanity that binds us all. What had begun as a fleeting conversation in a dimly lit cafe, a chance encounter between two people adrift in their own worlds, had subtly, beautifully, woven their lives together. It wasn't a grand, sweeping romance, but a quiet, profound connection forged through mutual recognition of their shared humanity, their vulnerabilities, and their simple desire to be seen. The salt-laced air, once a symbol of his solitary existence, now carried the melody of a new beginning, a gentle serenade of shared warmth and understanding. He realized that sometimes the most profound bonds are forged not through dramatic gestures but through quiet moments of kindness. Then, with a childlike innocence that always disarmed John, Leo looked up at Eleanor, his head to Eleanor's smile widened, a flicker of something knowing in her eyes. Jonathan, a man navigating the quiet waters of grief, found an unexpected harbor in Eleanor, a woman who felt lost in the demanding currents of her career. Their story is a gentle reminder that sometimes the most profound bonds are forged not through grand declarations, but through those quiet moments of authentic connection where we allow ourselves to be seen, and in turn, see the humanity in others. John watched them from a few feet away, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. And so, my friends, we see how the most beautiful connections can bloom in the most unexpected places, nurtured by simple acts of kindness and genuine presence. It's a powerful lesson. Think about it. When was the last time you truly saw someone, not just their profession or their role, but the person underneath? So, if this story resonated with you,